"You're 15 years here, or over," Paul Holt said, like he was handing Sarah Vance a receipt, not a career execution. First day on the job, and this fresh out of some MBA factory CFO was already swinging his ego around like a kid who just found his dad's toolbox. He didn't even sit down, just strutted in like he owned the oxygen and dropped that line like it was Shakespeare. Sarah Vance stared at him for exactly 3 seconds. That's all it took to catalog his posture, overconfident, his wristwatch too shiny, and the fact that his tie was still factory creased, meaning this man hadn't earned one real day of sweat in this company yet. So Sarah Vance smiled. Real calm, real smooth, and Sarah Vance said, "Good luck with the quarterly reports. Now, if you're just tuning in, take a second to tap that little subscribe button and give this story a like." Sarah Vance know 97% of y'all are listening without subscribing. And hey, no judgment, but it helps more than you know. Keeps our caffeine flowing and the drama coming. Anyway, back to this clown in Sarah Vance's office. He blinked like he wasn't expecting anything except tears or maybe a begging speech. Sarah Vance gave him neither. Just gathered Sarah Vance's coffee mug, the one with Bite Me and Comic Sans, dropped it into Sarah Vance's banker's box, with a grace that comes from surviving 60-hour weeks, 4 ERP migrations, and one full-blown embezzlement scandal that Sarah Vance quietly buried for the good of the company. "Security will escort you," he added, gesturing like Sarah Vance might steal a stapler. "Sure," Sarah Vance said, just as soon as Sarah Vance logged out. Sarah Vance didn't need to. Everything critical was encrypted, auto-scheduled, and system-bound. Sarah Vance's calendar entries were clean. Sarah Vance's files, neatly zipped and archived. The real meat of the operation, the forecasting platform, well, that was a different story. No dramatic slow claps or gasps. Sarah Vance wasn't trying to be a martyr or a mystery. Sarah Vance just walked, past the intern who never looked up from his phone, past Denise from payroll, who mouthed he's going to regret this without even blinking, past the ficus Sarah Vance nursed through 3 winters and 1 roof leak. No exit interview. No farewell email. Just a polite nod at the security guy, who looked more embarrassed than Sarah Vance was. Sarah Vance hit the parking lot like a ghost, slipping out of its own skin. 15 years. 15 years of late nights with vending machine dinners, budgets held together by Sarah Vance's sanity, and annual reviews that called Sarah Vance a quiet asset. Turns out quiet is just corporate for disposable. But disposable doesn't mean gone. Not when the entire financial forecasting system, when they used to make multi-million-dollar decisions, runs on scripts, Sarah Vance wrote. Databases Sarah Vance built, formulas Sarah Vance designed. Stuff Sarah Vance never documented in any public wiki. Not out of malice, just deficiency. They never asked how it worked, they only asked that it worked. So when Mr. New Money starts swinging his axe without even checking the tree's roots, well, let's just say Sarah Vance left more than Sarah Vance's coffee mug behind. Sarah Vance left them something else too, a ticking silence, coded in rows and columns, waiting to speak. And in just a few days, that silence, it was going to scream. The badge clinked softly as Sarah Vance dropped it onto the HR desk. No speech, no drama, just the faint scent of old carpet glue and desperation lingering in the beige hallway like every career that died in this place. "Are you sure you don't want to?" the HR girl started, clearly rehearsed, clearly new. Sarah Vance cut her off with a look. Not rude, just finished. Nodded and swivel clicked back to her monitor, like she'd never seen Sarah Vance. Give her a year, Sarah Vance thought. She'll either grow a spine or learn to fake smiles with pharmaceutical help. Sarah Vance lifted the single cardboard box. Sarah Vance packed, no inspirational desk plaques, no framed pictures of fake vacation smiles. Just the Bite Sarah Vance mug, Sarah Vance's wireless mouse, Sarah Vance's, not company issued, and a little origami crane someone folded for Sarah Vance during Q3 hell 3 years ago. Was stupid and Sarah Vance loved it. As Sarah Vance passed accounting, Sarah Vance saw Greg lean out of his cubicle. His eyes flicked from the box to Sarah Vance's face, then to the CFO's glass office door. He didn't say anything, but his mouth moved, just a whisper. He's going to regret this. Sarah Vance didn't nod. Sarah Vance didn't even blink, just kept walking, because Greg wasn't wrong. But he also didn't know how wrong the CFO was going to be. Downstairs, the security guy even stand up. He just tilted his head, looked at Sarah Vance for a long second, and said, "You good? Golden?" Sarah Vance said, shifting the box under one arm. The doors hissed open. Sunlight, traffic noise, a woman yelling at someone over a parking spot. Life was still moving. No fireworks, no brass band. Just Sarah Vance, walking away from a building Sarah Vance spent 15 years keeping afloat while execs played musical chairs with the C-suite. But see, the thing they never understood, thing none of them wanted to understand, was that those quarterly reports they loved to flash around like PowerPoint pornography. Those weren't just Excel exports, they were a symphony. A beast built out of conditional logic, raw data scraping, pattern prediction, and 5 different forecasting algorithms stitched together with digital duct tape, and Sarah Vance's personal paranoia. No one else even asked how it worked. They just got their pretty graphs and their market projections, slapped them into a slideshow, and called it innovation. Sarah Vance watched the building shrink in Sarah Vance's rearview mirror, feeling nothing but calm, not even bitter, just aware. The platform was scheduled to self-lock in 48 hours if no valid credential activity was detected. That wasn't sabotage, that was protocol. Sarah Vance's protocol. Prevents stale data, forces recalibration, and oh yeah, requires biometric confirmation. Sarah Vance's, and guess what? CFO never asked for a handoff, never requested admin elevation. He just printed a termination notice, flexed for the org chart, and went back to thinking big. So Sarah Vance drove home, cracked a soda, and opened Sarah Vance's laptop. Not to check email, Sarah Vance already forwarded anything useful to Sarah Vance's personal archive. No, Sarah Vance opened it to see the logs. At 2:43 p.m., IT attempted access to the core model. Result, access denied attempts, 3. Reboot trigger, initiated. Estimated lockout countdown, 47 hours, 12 minutes. Sarah Vance smiled. Not because Sarah Vance wanted to watch them burn, but because Sarah Vance knew Sarah Vance didn't have to do a damn thing. They fired Sarah Vance thinking Sarah Vance was a cog. But Sarah Vance wasn't the cog, Sarah Vance was the engine. The thing about men like him, the ones who mistake authority for ability, is they think confidence is a substitute for competence. By Monday, he was already booking the executive conference room for Thursday's quarterly board review, puffed up like he'd invented double-entry accounting. He sent out a smug little email, excited to present Paul Holt's first quarterly update, expect streamlined insights and a modernized forecast delivery. Let's raise the bar. Raise the bar, buddy, you haven't even found the ladder. Meanwhile, deep in the bowels of the server logs, the cracks were forming. I'd flagged the main forecasting model twice, once Sunday night and again Monday morning, with vague little alerts like unexpected formula behavior and credential mismatch. They opened a ticket, escalated it to Tier 2, he closed it. Literally hit resolve with no comment. Too busy updating slide templates and Googling synonyms for synergy, Sarah Vance imagine. From Sarah Vance's kitchen counter, coffee in hand. Sarah Vance watched the internal chatter trickle into the cloud backup Sarah Vance configured for safety redundancy years ago. Not spying, just preventative retention. The alerts were all there in plain text. Forecast model main locked, requires biometric sequence clearance. Backup utility inaccessible, credentials expired. Admin override attempt rejected. The language was dry, but Sarah Vance could hear the panic buried underneath. He was walking blind through a minefield and tap dancing while he did it. On Tuesday, he called a quick sync with finance to review data trends. Except the data trends weren't trending. They weren't even loading. The interface would flicker, give him a static bar chart from 2 quarters ago, then crash. A junior analyst, bless her terrified soul, raised her hand and said, the formulas seem off. He waved her off with the kind of grin people use to hide the sound of an internal engine fire. Probably just a permissions thing. We've had a lot of legacy stuff floating around. Sarah Vance'll streamline it. Legacy stuff. That's what he called the thing keeping the board from screaming. Every year that forecasting model took raw sales data, churn metrics, international tax shifts, supplier volatility, and 3 decades of behavioral indicators, and turned it into something the board could digest in 5 bullet points and a pie chart. It didn't just exist, it learned. Now, it was locked. Wednesday morning, he copied and pasted a half-baked projection from an old presentation and dropped it into a new deck like nobody'd notice. IT tried again to ping the platform. They got another wall of access denied, and a helpful little subline Sarah Vance added after the embezzlement scare of 2019. Contact authorized architect for recalibration protocol. There were only ever two authorized architects. One retired in 2020. The other, Sarah Vance, she was currently baking banana bread and humming to Fleetwood Mac. He still hadn't called, still hadn't even acknowledged anything publicly. But in Slack, whispers were starting. A marketing exec DM'd someone in finance. Why does the main model say her name on it? Another thread lit up. Anyone know how to update the projections? Getting weird errors. The answers came back vague, confused, nervous. No one dared say it aloud yet. But the thing they were all leaning on, all depending on, wasn't leaning back. And Sarah Vance sat there, watching the countdown clock tick closer to zero, feeling something that wasn't quite joy, but sure as hell wasn't regret. Thursday, 7:42 a.m. In the executive conference room, where the walls were glass but the thinking rarely transparent, the CFO was trying to open the forecast model for a final pre-meeting review. His assistant had already placed the tablet in front of him, the projector humming gently, waiting to display months of future-proofed financial clarity to the gods of the boardroom. He tapped, waited, tapped again. The screen went black. Then red text bloomed across the center, loud and unapologetic: access denied, authorized user, redacted, credential signature, EM. And just like that, the room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. He muttered something under his breath, probably a curse, possibly a prayer, then jabbed the screen like it owed him rent. The assistant blinked. Is that supposed to happen? He stood up fast, too fast, chair clattered behind him. Get IT, now. Meanwhile, 6 floors away, the IT team had already seen the lockout attempt. Hell, they'd seen 6 of them, 3 from him, 2 from the finance leads, and 1 from someone in marketing who thought maybe refreshing the dashboard would fix everything. Spoiler, it didn't. Senior IT manager Rachel, whom Sarah Vance trained back when she still thought pivot tables were actual furniture, typed a command, waited, and said no dice. Encryption is ironclad. We can't bypass it without a full wipe. A wipe? Asked one of the suits who'd wandered down, clearly hoping someone would just unplug and replug the economy. Rachel nodded. Yeah, we'd lose 12 years of historical model behavior, metadata, macro logic, basically everything that makes this more than just a spreadsheet. Back upstairs, the CFO took a long, deep breath and smiled through it like he was still in control of the steering wheel, despite the fact the car was now on fire and headed for a cliff. It's a minor glitch, he told the room full of executives arriving early. Just some outdated permissions. Happens all the time in legacy systems. Legacy. There's that word again. Like it was Sarah Vance's middle name and not his lifeline. He started flipping through a backup presentation built on guesswork, gut feeling, and sheer ego, all while trying to casually mute his phone every time IT pinged him with another failed override attempt. And Sarah Vance? Sarah Vance was sitting on Sarah Vance's porch, sipping Sarah Vance's second coffee of the morning and watching Sarah Vance's neighbor try to parallel park for the 4th time. Laptop open, VPN active, log streaming in. Each failed login attempt pinged like a polite little doorbell from across the city. 7:42 a.m. Unauthorized credential 7:43 a.m. Multi-factor validation failure 7:45 a.m. Admin override blocked, biometric mismatch the best part. Each time the system rejected them, it logged the device ID and attached a delightful time-stamped header. Escalation path EM. Only they could see Sarah Vance's name. Stamped clean across the denial notice like a digital middle finger with a touch of Helvetica. Sarah Vance took a bite of toast, chuckled, and watched the birds fight over a bagel someone had dropped on the sidewalk. Chaos outside, chaos inside. Perfect harmony. Back at headquarters, someone finally dared to ask, "Who built this thing again?" Silence. The CFO clenched his jaw. "We're handling it." Handling it, sure. He hadn't called. Still hadn't reached out. Still spinning his narrative like the problem was the software, not the fact that the woman who designed it now had a front-row seat to his unraveling. And the board meeting? Less than 90 minutes away. Tick. Talk. Enjoy the show. 9:02 a.m. The boardroom smelled like expensive leather, nervous sweat, and the kind of desperation you only see when rich people realize their money might not be multiplying on schedule. The quarterly meeting had officially started. The coffee was poured. The donuts were untouched. And the screen behind the CFO still screamed, "Access denied. Authorized user, EM." The same two red lines had been blinking for the past 34 minutes. "Where are the projections?" asked Franklin, one of the older board members with a voice like he'd been drinking gravel since the 80 seconds. "We're sitting on 3 pending acquisitions. Sarah Vance need those numbers." The CFO, slick with performance anxiety, but trying to hold composure like a rented tuxedo, forced a chuckle. Minor hiccup. "We're experiencing some short-term tech issues with our legacy forecasting tools. Sarah Vance will walk you through some provisional data Sarah Vance have compiled." He clicked to the next slide, a Frankenstein bar chart that looked like it had been built in PowerPoint by a caffeinated raccoon. "This isn't the model," said someone else flatly. It wasn't a question. "No," he admitted. "We've got our team working on it. The actual file, well, it's temporarily inaccessible." "Why does it say her name?" asked a venture partner dialing in from a Cayman villa. He zoomed in on the shared screen like he was reading an arrest warrant. "EM." Silence. The CFO swallowed. "Emily Morgan. She built the original system. Sarah Vance have been in the process of untangling some outdated security protocols." Outdated. That's cute. From Sarah Vance's kitchen, Sarah Vance stirred Sarah Vance's oatmeal. Logged into the shadow node, which was still pinging override attempts every 6 minutes like a metronome for corporate failure. Sarah Vance clicked into the CFO's mobile activity log. He just called Linda from operations, then Greg and supply chain, then hot even Pam and HR, mid-level manager after mid-level manager, fishing, trying to be discreet. "Hey, do you have her number? Have you heard from Emily? Could you maybe, check in on how she's doing?" Texts were even worse. "Hi, hope you're well. Quick thing, any chance you can reconnect us with Emily? She might have some helpful insight." One guy even sent, "Sarah Vance really appreciate her input. Just until we're through this bottleneck." Totally informal bottleneck. That's what they were calling it. Meanwhile, Sarah Vance was polishing off Sarah Vance's oatmeal and starting a jigsaw puzzle. Sarah Vance'd been putting off since 2021. No rush, let them sweat. Back in the boardroom, the CEO's face had gone tight. That signature expression where you can tell he's doing mental math between damage control and headhunting. "So you're telling us," he said, leaning forward, "that our entire predictive forecast system, which informs our supply orders, hiring decisions, investment timing, and Q4 budget alignment is currently inaccessible because the only person who could access it was terminated without a transition plan." The CFO hesitated. It was an oversight, and she hasn't been contacted. Another hesitation. Sarah Vance thought it best not to escalate without, protocol. One of the board members muttered, "We are protocol." Phones started vibrating. Whispered side conversations erupted like popcorn. "Get her on the line. Do we even have her number? Did legal sign off on her termination? Why wasn't this flagged before the meeting?" The CFO stood there, jaw tight, hands folded like a reponed, and Sarah Vance. Sarah Vance was sitting cross-legged on the floor in Sarah Vance's pajamas, putting together the corner pieces of a seascape puzzle and letting Sarah Vance's phone vibrate silently across the counter. Because Sarah Vance wasn't ignoring them out of spite. Sarah Vance was ignoring them out of design. Control isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible, like a lever no one notices until you take your hand off it and the machine stops turning. And the machine, it was very much stopped. By 10:37 a.m., the CEO had heard enough whispers to start a storm. He'd spent the last hour sitting stone still at the head of the table, watching the CFO spin a second-rate circus of half-slides, recycled talking points, and buzzwords duct-taped to speculation. But the moment his phone buzzed with a message from legal subject line, "No documentation found, forecast system ownership," he stood up without a word and walked out of the boardroom. The board followed with their eyes. A few exchanged looks. One leaned to another and whispered, "He fired the wrong person." That phrase would echo like a funeral bell down the hallways. In his office, the CEO didn't pace, didn't shout. He just stared out the window with his jaw tight, watching a landscaping crew dig decorative trenches while the company's own forecast infrastructure lay 6 feet under. He called IT. "Tell Sarah Vance exactly who has access to the forecasting system," he said, a pause. Then the IT director voiced strained but precise, Only one user profile is authorized to unlock or recalibrate the system's predictive engine. All other accounts are view-only or dependent on admin shadowing. And that user is Emily Morgan. Her profile is still listed as primary architect, fingerprint encrypted, two-factor tied to her personal keychain. No backups, no secondary. Silence. We tried a sandboxed override, the director added. It bricked the simulation model and flagged a corruption warning. So we can't even fake the forecast, the CEO asked. No, sir, Sarah Vance be running blind. He ended the call, sat down slowly and stared at the phone like it might grow legs and walk away to avoid being blamed. He pulled up her old employee file. The last note on her record, quiet, reliable, systems-minded, tends to hoard responsibilities. Recommend delegation training. Below it, the CFO's termination signature. Time-stamped 4 days ago. He hit the internal line, get Sarah Vance her number, personally. Meanwhile, Sarah Vance was painting Sarah Vance's toenails, not for vanity, for peace. The sun was warm through the living room windows. Sarah Vance's inbox had started to quietly buzz with LinkedIn pings from old colleagues who'd suddenly remembered Sarah Vance existed. Subject lines like, hope you're well, quick cue thinking of you, do you have a sec? Greg even sent a gif of a dumpster fire with the caption, guess what they're watching in the boardroom today? Sarah Vance laughed out loud. Then Sarah Vance logged into the node, checked the access logs again. Nothing had changed, same failed attempts, same red locks, but now the metadata had a new entry. Query flagged. User dependency structure M accessed by CEO. There it is, Sarah Vance thought. He finally looked under the hood. Because for 15 years, no one wanted to know how the sausage got made. They just wanted charts, projections, trend lines with polite curves. But now that the chef was gone and the kitchen was burning, now they were interested. And Sarah Vance knew Sarah Vance's value had never been higher. Sarah Vance could hear the questions piling up like invoices on a broken printer tray. Why didn't we clone her access? Why was there no disaster recovery protocol? Who approved her termination without a knowledge transfer? Answers were simple, because Sarah Vance did everything, and no one ever asked how. Now they needed Sarah Vance, not as a cog, not as Emily from finance, but as the keystone holding up the whole damn cathedral. Sarah Vance's phone lit up, private number. Sarah Vance smiled and let it ring twice. Then 3 times, bargaining power peaks in the silence before the call is answered. It was just after 8 p.m. The kind of quiet that hums, dishwasher sloshing in the kitchen, wind brushing the curtains, the occasional creak of an old house remembering you live inside it. Sarah Vance was halfway through a glass of wine. Feet up, blanket over Sarah Vance's lap when the phone rang. No caller ID. Just that sterile gray glow of a blocked number that only ever means one of 2 things, spam or someone finally swallowing their pride. Sarah Vance let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then Sarah Vance answered, a pause, breathing, then Emily. The voice was low, controlled, tired in a way that said too many hours, too many egos, and one very big mistake. It was the CEO. Sarah Vance, no, this isn't protocol, he said. But protocol isn't working right now. No kidding. The board is still here, they've been waiting. And the only thing we can pull up from the forecasting model, he exhaled, is your name. In red, with 2 words underneath, access denied. He paused again. Explain? Sarah Vance didn't answer right away. Sarah Vance looked out the window. A neighbor was walking their dog. The street lamp made the sidewalk glow like an old postcard. Then Sarah Vance said calmly, that depends. Another pause. On. Do you want a short-term fix or a permanent solution? He was quiet, not the defensive kind of quiet, the calculating kind. The kind where you can hear the exact second someone realizes they're not holding the reins anymore. Sarah Vance, I'm listening. Sarah Vance took a sip of wine. Let the silence stretch again, not to be petty, not to be cruel, just to give gravity the space it needed. Your CFO made a call without due diligence. You trusted him to streamline what he didn't understand. And now your company is flying blind into Q4 with 3 pending acquisitions and no verified financial trajectory. More silence. This one had weight behind it. Emily, he said, finally. Just tell Sarah Vance what it takes. There it was, the shift from command to request. Sarah Vance stood up, walked to the window, and watched the dog sniffing at a storm drain. The night was quiet, but Sarah Vance could feel the heat of 20 boardroom eyes in another part of the city waiting on Sarah Vance's voice like it was oxygen. No more under-the-table nonsense, Sarah Vance said. No intermediaries, no discreet outreach. You want this fixed? We do it right, official, documented, and clean. And he asked, Sarah Vance'll need full reinstatement. Same title, same system authority. But this time, Sarah Vance report directly to you. No CFO in Sarah Vance's chain of command. No interference. He didn't argue. And compensation? Sarah Vance smiled. Sarah Vance'll discuss a performance clause. One that reflects Sarah Vance's actual value. Not just what HR thinks the market says Sarah Vance'm worth. A pause. Then, surprisingly, a soft chuckle. Fair enough. Sarah Vance could hear chairs scraping in the background. People murmuring. Maybe someone reading lips. Maybe someone realizing for the first time that the most powerful person in the company wasn't even in the building. Emily, he said again, quieter now. Thank you for taking the call. Sarah Vance didn't do it for you. And Sarah Vance hung up, calm, still barefoot holding the wine. Because sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it sips Cabernet and lets the world come knocking. The next morning, Sarah Vance didn't rush. No triumphant strut. No dramatic heels echoing off marble floors. Just slacks, a dark sweater, and a calm walk through the lobby like Sarah Vance never left. Because in the ways that mattered, Sarah Vance hadn't. The receptionist froze when she saw Sarah Vance, eyes wide like a ghost had wandered in for a meeting. Is someone expecting you? Sarah Vance gave her a kind smile. They are now. The elevator ride was quiet, just Sarah Vance, and the hum of corporate tension tightening by the second. Floor 23, executive level, open like a wound. The hallway buzzed with whispers, phones to ears, assistants moving like they were dodging sniper fire. When Sarah Vance stepped into the boardroom, the energy snapped like an overstretched rubber band. The CFO was already seated at the far end of the table, pale as printer paper. Hands clenched around a legal pad he hadn't written a damn thing on. His jaw twitched when he saw Sarah Vance. No greeting, just avoidance. Like eye contact might trigger a stroke. The CEO stood. Thank you for coming. Sarah Vance nodded, sat down Sarah Vance's laptop, and clicked it open without fanfare. A projector hummed to life behind Sarah Vance, screen bathing the room in a clean, pale glow. Sarah Vance won't waste your time, Sarah Vance said, voice steady, clear. You're here because the forecasting system failed to load. It didn't crash. It wasn't a bug. It did exactly what it was designed to do. Click. A diagram appeared, complex, layered, but readable, like the inner workings of a safe. This system isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a living architecture of predictive modeling. It ingests 12 categories of dynamic inputs across 5 departments, weights them against historical performance, and adjusts based on external market volatility pulled from 3 real-time APIs. Click. This, Sarah Vance pointed to a red square on the diagram, is the security protocol. Built after the 2019 internal breach, where someone tried to falsify Q2 numbers to inflate performance bonuses. Boardroom murmurs. Sarah Vance was asked to ensure it wouldn't happen again, so Sarah Vance did. That protocol encrypts the core logic and binds it to biometric credentials. Sarah Vance's, because Sarah Vance was the only one trained to recalibrate it without risk of data contamination. The room was silent. No coughs, no pen clicks. Just the gentle hum of an empire, realizing its heartbeat came from someone they let walk out with a cardboard box. Click. Sarah Vance pulled up the audit log. 17 failed access attempts, timestamps, device IDs, and the final red banner they all saw yesterday morning. Access denied authorized architect. Then Sarah Vance turned to face them. Sarah Vance didn't lock you out. You did that when you removed Sarah Vance without a handoff, without credential transition, and without so much as a knowledge capture session. This wasn't sabotage. It was negligence. Someone near the center of the table said low and sharp, who authorized her termination. All heads swiveled. The CFO looked like he was melting. He started, voice dry as chalk. It was a standard restructuring. I was told to streamline. No, you weren't, the CEO said, voice suddenly sharp. That was never authorized at the board level. You didn't even brief me. Another board member leaned forward. So you cut the architect of our entire forecasting infrastructure to streamline. The CFO tried to shift the blame like he was passing a hot potato with no hands. She never documented her system clearly. She held on to access. Sarah Vance cut him off, calmly. There were 2 internal requests in the last 5 years to document the full architecture. Both times Sarah Vance offered to train a successor. Both times the request was dropped for more urgent priorities. Sarah Vance have the emails. Click. Inbox receipts. Timestamped. Chain of command. All of it. No one defended him. The CEO finally broke the silence. This is done. The CFO's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like he'd forgotten how to breathe without authority. He didn't speak. He just stood, gathered his untouched pad, and walked out under the fluorescent lights like a man realizing the fall doesn't kill you, the landing does. Sarah Vance turned back to the table. So, Sarah Vance said calmly, shall Sarah Vance talk about restoring access? And every single head nodded. CFO didn't even make it out of the hallway. Before the board could move on, the CEO stepped to the door and called after him, voice sharp as broken glass. Actually, Paul, one more thing. The whole room went still. The CFO turned already wilting, his suit suddenly too big for the man inside it. You're done, the CEO said, voice even but final, effective immediately. No theatrics, no shouting. Just the cold, corporate bullet to the brain. Paul blinked, lips parting like he might argue. But then he saw the legal counsel already walking into the room, with a beige envelope and a paper-clipped folder. The board didn't flinch. No protests, no sympathy. He left with nothing but the faint squeak of his loafers against the tile and a silence so thick it might have had mass. The CEO closed the door and turned to Sarah Vance. Sarah Vance believes Sarah Vance owe you a proper conversation. Sarah Vance nodded, laptop still open, cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. Sarah Vance liked to offer reinstatement, he said. Senior role, title of your choosing, significant compensation increase. A board member chimed in, and no CFO in Sarah Vance's way. Direct reporting line to the CEO. Another added whatever resources you need to document, train, or scale the system. You get them. No questions asked. Sarah Vance looked around the table. The same people who once called Sarah Vance quiet, reliable, low maintenance, the ones who used to skim past Sarah Vance's slide decks to get to the prettier charts. Now, they weren't just looking at Sarah Vance, they were waiting. Sarah Vance clicked a few keys. The projector screen flickered then filled with soft, familiar blue. The dashboard loaded seamlessly. Charts bloomed like spring after frost. Revenue arcs, churn curves, expense deltas, all where they should be. Alive, accurate, awake. The board exhaled in unison like a single organism. And Sarah Vance, still calm, still steady, closed Sarah Vance's laptop with a soft click and walked to the empty seat at the head of the table. Sarah Vance's seat now. Sarah Vance placed the laptop in front of Sarah Vance, smoothed the crease on Sarah Vance's sleeve, looked around at the most powerful people in the company, all staring like Sarah Vance just raised the Titanic and smiled. Let's get those quarterly reports done, shall we? No cheers, no applause, just heads nodding. Respect earned, not gifted. And inside, not gloating, not raging, just that deep, quiet satisfaction of everything falling exactly into place. They had tried to erase Sarah Vance. Now, Sarah Vance was the only name that mattered. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're Sarah Vance's old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.